Checkpoint Duga, 6:15 a.m. You stand at the edge of what will soon be called the exclusion zone, though no one has named it that yet. It's April 27th, 1986, just past dawn. The disaster happened yesterday, but the world doesn't fully understand what has occurred. You certainly don't. The morning air has a curious quality, clean to your senses, but harboring microscopic betrayal. You take a breath, filling your lungs with what seems like ordinary spring air, slightly damp with morning dew. There is nothing to alert you to danger, no scent of burning, no visible smoke on the horizon, just the peculiar absence of bird song that you might attribute to the early hour if you notice it at all. You step forward. The road stretches ahead, unremarkable except for its emptiness. Usually, there would be workers heading to the power plant for the morning shift change. Today, there is no one. The silence has a thickness to it, a pressure against your eardrums that makes you swallow to equalize. You assume it's just the weather, perhaps a front moving in. The first village you approach seems abandoned, though evacuation orders haven't yet been issued for this area. A few windows stand open. Laundry still hangs on lines, moving slightly in a breeze you can barely feel against your skin. You call out. Your voice seems to travel only a short distance before being absorbed by the strange density of the air. No one answers. Perhaps they've already left, sensing something you haven't yet perceived. You continue walking. The road is dusty, and each step lifts small clouds around your shoes. You don't think to cover your mouth. Why would you? The dust seems ordinary, just the accumulated dirt of rural Soviet roads. It settles on your pant legs. It works its way into the creases of your shoes. With each step, you stir more of it into the air around you. You breathe it in. Your lungs process it without complaint. Your body for now registers no alarm. A military truck passes, heading toward the power plant. The soldiers inside wear masks. You wonder why, briefly, before continuing your walk. Perhaps there was a fire. You've heard rumors of an accident, but nothing official has been announced. The government broadcasting service mentioned a minor incident, nothing to be concerned about. You have no reason to doubt this. You have no Geiger counter. You have no hazmat suit. You have only your senses, and they are telling you everything is normal. The air temperature feels pleasant. The morning chill is burning off. As the sun rises higher, you remove your jacket and carry it over your arm. The sunlight feels good on your skin. It always does, that first real warmth after winter. You don't know that ultraviolet light is causing secondary ionization of the radioactive particles around you, creating another invisible layer of danger. You just know that it feels like spring, like renewal. The irony will occur to you much later. As you approach another small settlement, you notice the doors of homes standing open. A pot sits on a still warm stove, the food inside uneaten. A television plays to an empty room. The electricity is still running. On the screen, a program about agricultural productivity continues as if nothing has changed. You step inside, calling out again. Your voice echoes through the empty house. On the table, breakfast sits, half-eaten. Wherever the family went, they left in a hurry. But there are no signs of panic, no overturned furniture, no dropped possessions, just the sudden absence of people. You help yourself to a glass of water from the tap. The water runs clear and cool. You drink deeply, your body accepting what your knowledge cannot yet warn against. The water from the local reservoir has already begun to show elevated levels of radioactive isotopes, but this information hasn't reached you. How could it? The authorities themselves are only beginning to understand the scope of the disaster. Outside again, you notice a peculiar metallic taste in your mouth. You attribute it to the water, perhaps to old pipes in the village system. You have no way of knowing. It's one of the first sensory indications of radiation exposure, the ionization of molecules in your saliva, creating that distinctive taste. You continue walking, swallowing repeatedly to try to clear it. The road leads closer to Pripyat, the workers' city, serving the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. You've been there before, a modern Soviet city, a triumph of nuclear-age urban planning, with its broad avenues and high-rise apartment blocks. Today, though, there's increased military activity. Roadblocks are being established. You skirt around them, taking paths through the woods that locals use. The forest feels different today. The usual rustling of small animals in the underbrush is absent. The leaves hang unnaturally still in the windless air. The radiation levels in these woods are already hundreds of times above normal. The pine trees nearest to the reactor will soon turn red and die, creating what will later be called the Red Forest. Today they still appear green and healthy, the needles efficiently capturing radioactive particles from the air, incorporating the poison into their very structure. You brush against them as you pass, dislodging invisible dust that clings to your clothing. You emerge from the woods near a small creek. The water moves sluggishly, catching the mid-morning light in ripples that seem oddly muted. You kneel and splash some water on your face. It feels cool against your skin. Later, you'll learn that the water systems were among the first to show concentrated radiation readings, the liquid medium perfect for carrying soluble radioactive elements. But now, it just refreshes you as you continue your journey. Ahead, you can see the cooling towers of the power plant in the distance, their massive concrete forms rising above the flat landscape. One of them no longer has the familiar plume of steam rising from its top. Something has clearly happened, but from this distance, there's no visible damage, no obvious catastrophe, just the absence of that plume, a negative space where energy production should be occurring. By now, the invisible particles have settled on your skin, your hair, under your fingernails. They've been drawn into your lungs with each breath. Some have made their way into your bloodstream. Your body's cells register the assault in ways your consciousness cannot perceive. Cellular damage has begun. DNA strands are breaking. Your immune system activates in confusion, unable to identify or combat the submicroscopic invader. You pass a field where cows still graze peacefully. They look up as you walk by, their large eyes showing no alarm. They continue eating the contaminated grass, incorporating the radioactive isotopes into their milk, which no one will come to collect today. The cows don't know that the grass they're eating will eventually kill them. Their systems, like yours, have no evolutionary defense against this invisible, tasteless, odorless threat. A helicopter passes overhead, flying toward the power plant, then another. Their rhythmic thumping breaks the unnatural silence briefly before fading. They're flying too high for you to see that the crew members are wearing protective gear. You wonder about the increased military presence, but continue walking. The curious human need to witness, to understand, drives you forward, despite the subtle warnings your body is trying and failing to process. Your watch shows it's approaching noon. You've been walking for hours now, each step bringing you closer to the reactor, deeper into the invisible cloud of radioactive particles that has settled over the landscape. The sun is high overhead, warm, on your bare arms. You've rolled up your sleeves, exposing more skin to the air, to the particles that drift and settle, that cling and penetrate. A dog runs past you, heading away from the direction of the power plant. It doesn't stop when you call to it. Animals often sense dangers before humans do. Changes in air pressure, sounds beyond our hearing range, subtle shifts in their environment that trigger survival instincts honed over millennia. But even they have no evolutionary preparation for radiation. The dog is running on instinct, away from something it can sense but not understand. You reach a village closer to the plant. Here, there is some activity. People loading possessions into cars, onto horse carts, whatever transportation is available. They move with urgency, but not panic. No one is screaming. No one is running. Just the methodical, quiet evacuation of people who have been told to leave, but not exactly why. Some of them look at you curiously as you walk toward the disaster. They're fleeing. Where are you going? There is an old woman asks, as she locks her front door, perhaps for the last time. Just to see. You respond. She makes the sign of the cross over you, and hurries to join her family in their overloaded larder. They drive away, leaving a trail of dust that settles back onto the road. Each dust mote carries its invisible passenger, its radioactive potential. You continue walking. The air grows warmer as noon approaches. You feel thirsty again, and regret not filling a bottle at the creek. The metallic taste in your mouth has intensified. Your tongue feels slightly swollen, though you attribute this to thirst rather than the early signs of radiation exposure. The trees thin out, giving way to more developed areas as you approach Pripyat, the model Soviet city, home to nearly 50,000 people, most of them workers at the power plant and their families. Today, the streets hold an unusual number of buses. People are being told to bring only essential items, for what they're being assured is a temporary evacuation from where you stand. You can see them boarding buses with small bags, helping children and elderly relatives. Their faces show confusion, concern, but not terror. They don't know yet. A man in civilian clothes, but with a military bearing, approaches you. This area is being evacuated, he says. You should leave immediately. What happened? You ask. A minor accident at the plant, he replies, the practiced line delivered with official certainty. Nothing to worry about, just precautionary measures. Please turn back now. You nod as if agreeing, but once he's moved on to speak to others, you continue your approach. The human need to witness is powerful. Besides, if it were truly dangerous, surely there would be more obvious signs. The sky remains blue. The air remains breathable. The ground beneath your feet feels solid. All your senses tell you that despite the unusual activity, despite the evacuation, there is no immediate danger to your person. Your senses lie. By now, you've received several times the annual permissible dose of radiation. The invisible particles continue their work inside your body, breaking chemical bonds, creating free radicals, damaging cell structures. Your body responds the only way it knows how, with inflammation, with immune response, with the primitive cellular defense mechanisms designed for visible invaders, for bacteria and viruses, not for radioactive isotopes that slip past every natural barrier. You find yourself at another checkpoint, this one more heavily guarded. Military vehicles block the road, soldiers in protective gear, though not full hazmat suits yet. Those will come later. Direct the evacuation buses through. One of them spots you approaching on foot. Stop there, he calls out, raising a hand. His face shows genuine alarm. This area is restricted. Turn back immediately. You raise your hands to show you're harmless. Just curious. What's happening at the plant? You ask. He doesn't answer your question. Instead, He points back the way you came. Leave now for your own safety. You hesitate, but something in his expression, a mixture of fear and determination, convinces you. You turn and begin walking away from the checkpoint, away from Pripyat, away from the reactor, but it's already too late. You've spent hours walking through radioactive fallout. The damage to your cells continues with each passing minute, with each heartbeat that circulates the absorbed particles through your system. As you walk back along the same road, you notice your skin feels warm, as if you've developed a mild sunburn despite the overcast sky. Your throat feels scratchy. You cough, a dry, unproductive cough that doesn't relieve the irritation. These are more signs your body is sending, more warnings you can't properly interpret. The evacuation traffic passes you heading the other direction. Buses filled with Pripyat residents, military vehicles, ambulances. The scale of the response is beginning to suggest something more serious than a minor incident. Still, there are no flames visible, no plume of smoke rising from the plant. The disaster remains invisible, its effects detectable only by instruments you don't possess. By late afternoon, fatigue begins to set in, not ordinary tiredness from a day of walking, but a bone-deep weariness that makes each step an effort. Your muscles ache as if you're coming down with the flu. The nausea you've been ignoring becomes more insistent. You stop at the side of the road and vomit into the ditch. The water you drank earlier, the breakfast you had before setting out, all of it comes up, providing momentary relief from the nausea, but not from the cause. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, not knowing that the action transfers more radioactive particles from your skin to your lips. You continue walking, more slowly now. The metallic taste in your mouth has become impossible to ignore. Your saliva is thick, difficult to swallow. Your eyes burn slightly, as if exposed to smoke, though the air appears clear. The sun begins its descent as you continue your journey away from the plant. The shadows lengthen across the road. The temperature drops slightly. You put your jacket back on, feeling a chill that comes as much from within as from the cooling air. Your body temperature is rising, a low-grade fever developing as your system responds to the cellular damage. As twilight approaches, you reach one of the villages you passed through this morning. It's completely deserted now. The television in the house where you stopped for water still plays to an empty room. You consider stopping there for the night. The thought of continuing your journey in your weakening state seems impossible, but something about the empty village, about the half-eaten meals and abandoned possessions, makes you uncomfortable. You continue walking as darkness falls, determined to reach a larger settlement where you might find help for what you're now convinced is a sudden, severe illness. The stars emerge overhead, impossibly bright, against the darkened countryside. No lights shine from any of the houses you pass. The power is still on. The streetlights cast pools of illumination on the empty road, but the people are gone, evacuated or fled of their own accord. You are alone in this landscape, walking through invisible danger with every step. Your watch, if you could see it in the darkness, would tell you that almost 24 hours have passed since the initial explosion at reactor number 4. In that time, the authorities have moved from denial to grudging acknowledgement to the beginnings of a response. But information moves slowly. The full truth of what has happened, of what is continuing to happen, remains restricted. The Soviet system, built on secrecy and control, cannot easily adapt to a disaster that refuses to be contained by borders or ideology. Working through the night with radiation sickness beginning to manifest, know none of this. You know only that you feel increasingly ill, that the metallic taste won't leave your mouth, that your skin burns as if exposed to strong sun, that your stomach rebels against even the thought of food. You know that something is very wrong, but you have no context, no framework for understanding what has happened to you. The road stretches ahead, empty under the stars. You continue walking because there is nothing else to do. Each step takes more effort than the last. Your breathing becomes labored. The air that has betrayed you with every breath seems thinner somehow, harder to draw into your irritated lungs. By midnight, you can go no farther. You sink down at the side of the road, back against a tree, face turned up to the star-filled sky. In the darkness, the world seems almost normal again, almost, except for the silence, except for the emptiness, except for the sickness building inside you, the cellular damage multiplying with each passing hour. You close your eyes. Just for a moment, you tell yourself, just until the dizziness passes, just until you can gather the strength to continue. The air around you holds its invisible secret. It passes across your skin, into your lungs, carrying its radioactive cargo into the core of your being. It is patient. It has all the time in the world. You do not. Abandoned bus stop, 8:30 a.m. morning, arrives with painful brightness. Your eyes, swollen and sensitive, struggle to adjust to the light filtering through the leaves above. You've slept at the roadside, your body finally surrendering to exhaustion. As you try to stand, every muscle protests. Your joints feel inflamed, resistant to movement. This is not ordinary stiffness from sleeping outdoors. This is your body's response to radiation damage at the cellular level, the inflammation of tissues, the immune system's confused attempt to fight an enemy it cannot identify. You manage to get to your feet, leaning against the tree for support. The world tilts and spins around you briefly. Before steadying, your mouth is dry, desperately dry, and the metallic taste has intensified overnight. You need water. You look around, trying to orient yourself. The road stretches empty in both directions. No vehicles have passed while you slept. In the distance, perhaps half a kilometer ahead, you can make out a bus stop, a small shelter with a bench. You begin walking toward it, each step deliberate and difficult. Your shoes stir up dust from the road, fine particles that dance in the morning light, catching the sun in tiny sparkles that might seem beautiful if you didn't now suspect their danger. The dust settles on your clothes, already contaminated from yesterday's journey. It rises around you in a small cloud with each footfall, entering your lungs with every labored breath. As you approach the bus stop, you see that the small shelter has a water pump beside it, public infrastructure for travelers waiting in this rural area. You move toward it with renewed purpose, ignoring the pain in your joints, the burning of your skin. Water. You need water. The pump handle resists at first, stiff from disuse, but after several attempts, it yields. Water gushes from the spout, clear and cold. You cup your hands beneath it, bringing them to your parched lips. The water soothes your throat momentarily, but does nothing for the metallic taste. If anything, it intensifies it, the minerals in the water binding with the radioactive particles already present in your mouth. You drink until your stomach feels full, until water drips from your chin onto your shirt. The fabric, you notice, is stained with sweat that dried overnight, sweat that carried radioactive particles from inside your body to the surface of your skin, only to be reabsorbed. Your body is trying to cleanse itself, the only way it knows how, but the invisible enemy is too pervasive, too persistent. Sitting on the bench in the bus shelter, You try to gather your thoughts, to make a plan. Your watch still works. It's just past 8:30 in the morning, almost 24 hours since you began your walk toward the power plant. The world around you has transformed in that time, from occupied to abandoned, from seemingly safe to obviously dangerous. You've transformed too, though. The changes are just beginning to manifest visibly. Looking down at your arms, you notice a redness to the skin, not in patches like sunburn, but uniformly across the surface, as if you've been scalded. Your skin feels tight, slightly swollen. When you press a finger against your forearm, the indentation remains for several seconds before slowly filling back in. Edema, fluid retention in your tissues, another sign of radiation exposure that you don't recognize. The dust continues its silent work. It's everywhere now on your skin, your clothes, in your hair. With each movement, you dislodge some particles and disturb others. They float in the air around you, invisible, except where they catch the sunlight just right to reveal their presence briefly before disappearing again. Like ghosts, they haunt the space around your body, the space inside your lungs, the bloodstream that carries them throughout your system. A sound breaks the morning stillness, the distant rumble of an engine. You look up to see a military truck approaching along the road. Hope rises in your chest. Help, perhaps medical attention for whatever is making you so ill. You stand, waving your arms, despite the pain the movement causes. The truck slows as it approaches the bus stop. 3 soldiers in protective gear, masks, gloves, but not full hazmat suits, regard you with a mixture of concern and caution. One of them calls to you in Ukrainian, then in Russian. When you don't immediately respond, "Are you from Pripyat, Chernobyl? Why are you out here alone?" You try to explain that you were just walking, just curious about the incident at the plant. Your voice sounds strange to your own ears. Hoarse, weak, speaking makes you cough. A dry, painful cough that bends you double. The soldiers exchange glances. One of them speaks into a radio, too quietly for you to hear the words. Another approaches you, maintaining a careful distance. "You need to come with us," he says. "There's been an accident. You may require medical attention." The understatement would be funny if you had the energy to laugh. Instead, you nod gratefully and allow them to help you into the back of the truck. They don't touch your skin directly, you notice. Their gloved hands guide you by your clothing. They seat you on a bench and hand you a cloth mask, indicating you should put it on. "It won't help much now," one of them says quietly, almost to himself, "but better than nothing." The truck starts moving again, heading away from the power plant, through the open back. You watch the landscape pass, the abandoned villages, the empty roads, the fields where no one works. Everything looks normal and completely wrong at the same time. The sunlight falls on buildings that will never again serve their purpose. It illuminates fields that may not be safely cultivated for decades. It catches in the swirling dust that follows the truck, dust laden with invisible poison. Your thoughts become increasingly disjointed as the journey continues. The fever that began yesterday has intensified. Your skin no longer just feels hot, it burns from within. Nausea comes in waves that leave you gasping. The soldiers watch you with expressions of pity and concern. They've seen this before in the last 24 hours. The early stages of acute radiation sickness. They know what comes next. The truck stops at what appears to be a temporary medical station set up in a school building in a larger town, far enough from the power plant to be considered safe for now. Medical personnel in protective clothing approach the truck. They help you down, supporting your weight when your legs threaten to give way. The world spins around you. Black spots dance at the edges of your vision. How close did he get? One of the medical workers asks the soldiers, "Found him at a bus stop, about 20 kilometers from the plant." One responds, "But he says he was walking from the exclusion perimeter yesterday. Probably got within 10 kilometers before being turned back." The medical worker nods grimly. They help you into the building, through corridors lined with others in similar or worse condition, power plant workers mostly, some local residents who didn't evacuate quickly enough, or who, like you, wandered too close out of curiosity. In a classroom repurposed as an examination room, they help you remove your contaminated clothing. Each item is placed in a plastic bag and sealed. Your naked skin reveals the full extent of the radiation erythema, the reddening that covers most of your body now. In some places, particularly where you were sweating the most, underarms, groin, behind your knees, blisters have begun to form. They wash you with soap and water, working methodically to remove as much external contamination as possible. The water runs red-tinged down the drain, not from blood, but from the damaged surface of your skin, sloughing off under their ministrations. You endure this in silence, save for the involuntary gasps when they touch particularly sensitive areas. Clean and dressed in a hospital gown, you're led to another classroom filled with army cots, a makeshift ward. They help you lie down. A doctor examines you briefly, checking your pulse. Rapid, your blood pressure dropping, your temperature 39.8 degrees Celsius. He listens to your lungs, frowning at what he hears. The beginning of radiation pneumonitis, the inflammation of lung tissue exposed to high levels of radiation, will move you to a hospital in Kiev. He tells you they have better facilities for treating this condition. You try to ask what this condition is exactly, but another coughing fit prevents you from speaking. When it subsides, leaving you gasping and tasting blood, the doctor is already moving to the next patient. A nurse brings you water and 2 pills she identifies as anti-nausea medication. You swallow them with difficulty. Your throat feels swollen, raw. Through the classroom windows, you can see more military vehicles arriving, more patients being helped inside. The scale of the disaster is becoming apparent in the number of affected individuals, in the grim efficiency of the response that has developed over the course of a single day. You close your eyes just for a moment. The dust, that ordinary seeming deadly dust, has worked its way into every part of you now. It has crossed barriers meant to protect your most vital systems. It has settled in your bone marrow, where blood cells are produced. It has penetrated organs, crossed the blood-brain barrier. The damage continues even now, even here in this place of relative safety. The invisible assault goes on at the cellular level, at the atomic level, breaking apart the very structures that make you who you are. When you open your eyes again, it's late afternoon. You must have slept, though you don't feel rested. If anything, you feel worse. The nausea has returned, despite the medication. The pain in your joints has intensified. Your skin feels too tight for your body. And now there's a new symptom. Your hair, when you run your hand through it, comes away in clumps. Not just a few strands, but entire handfuls. The follicles, dividing rapidly under normal circumstances, have been particularly vulnerable to radiation damage. A different doctor approaches your cot. She checks your vital signs, examines the blisters that have expanded during your sleep. "We're going to move you now," she says. "The helicopter is here to take you and others to hospital number 6 in Kiev. They specialize in radiation treatment." You try to sit up, but the room spins violently around you. 2 orderlies have to help you onto a stretcher. They carry you out of the building into the late afternoon sunlight. The light hurts your eyes, sensitive from radiation damage to your corneas. You close them as they load you into the helicopter. The noise of the rotors is deafening, but it fades as you slip in and out of consciousness during the flight. Images flash behind your closed eyelids, the empty villages, the grazing cows, the swirling dust in sunlight, the everyday scenes made deadly by what they concealed, the invisible threat that seeped into every breath, every drop of water, every moment of your ill-advised journey. Hospital number 6, specialized in treating radiation exposure, receives an influx of patients from the Chernobyl disaster. You're one of many, triaged according to estimated exposure and symptoms. Your exposure, the doctors calculate based on your account of your movements and your developing symptoms, was between 4 and 6 grays, a unit measuring absorbed radiation dose, enough to cause severe acute radiation syndrome, enough to be potentially lethal without aggressive treatment. They place you in isolation. Your body is now itself radioactive, minimally, but measurably. The isotopes absorbed into your tissues continue to decay, emitting radiation that can be detected by the dosimeters the medical staff wear when they enter your room. You are a danger to others now, particularly to pregnant women and children, whose rapidly dividing cells are most vulnerable to radiation damage. Through the haze of fever, pain, and the powerful medications they give you to combat the symptoms, you catch glimpses of your deteriorating condition. Your hair continues to fall out, not just from your head, but your entire body. The blisters on your skin rupture, leaving raw weeping sores that resist healing. The lining of your intestines, composed of rapidly dividing cells similar to those in hair follicles, begins to break down, leading to bloody diarrhea that leaves you dehydrated despite the intravenous fluids. The dust that you walk through, that you breathed, that seems so ordinary in the morning light, has transformed you at the most fundamental level. It has broken DNA strands in your cells, leading to replication errors or cell death. It has damaged the bone marrow that produces your blood cells, leading to dropping counts of white cells, leaving you vulnerable to infection, platelets, making you susceptible to uncontrolled bleeding, and red cells, reducing oxygen transport throughout your body. Days pass in a blur of medical interventions, of faces masked and gloved, of voices that sometimes seem to come from very far away. They tell you your condition. They explain the treatments they're attempting. They note your radiation dose estimate in your chart, but comprehension comes and goes with your lucidity, fragmented like the damaged DNA in your cells. In moments of clarity, you think about the dust, the ordinary dust on a country road, the dust stirred by your footsteps as you walked curiously toward disaster, the dust settling on your skin, your clothes, your hair, the dust you inhaled with every breath, so ordinary in appearance, so impossible to recognize as a threat. Dust that contained cesium-137, strontium-90, iodine-131, plutonium-239, invisible hitchhikers on microscopic particles that found their way into the deepest recesses of your body. A week after your exposure, as the damaged cells of your bone marrow fail to produce new blood cells to replace those that naturally die, your condition deteriorates sharply. The blisters on your skin have become large open wounds resistant to healing. Your immune system, compromised by low white cell counts, cannot fight the infections that take hold in these wounds. Sepsis develops, a systemic infection that further taxes your already failing systems. The doctors continue their efforts, blood transfusions, antibiotics, growth factors to stimulate your bone marrow, but the damage done in those hours of walking, of breathing the dust, of drinking contaminated water, proves too extensive. The invisible enemy that seeped into you has destroyed too many critical systems. 2 weeks after you stood at the edge of what would become known as the exclusion zone, after you breathed air that seems so clean and ordinary, your body surrenders to the immense damage done at the cellular level. Your systems fail one by one. The dust, that simple, everyday dust, made deadly by human error and atomic power, completes its work. In the years that follow, the world will come to understand what happened at Chernobyl. The exclusion zone will be formally established, 30 kilometers of evacuated land around the damaged reactor. Scientists will study the effects of the radiation on the environment, on the abandoned buildings, on the people who, like you, were exposed without protection or warning. Lessons will be learned. Protocols will be established. The invisible will be made visible through better detection, better education, better preparation. But none of that helps you, who walked into danger without understanding, who breathed the dust without recognizing its deadly nature, who became one of the early casualties of a disaster whose full scope would take years to comprehend. Your journey ended where it began, in the seemingly ordinary air that lied with every breath, in the dust you couldn't see that carried death in every particle. The dust remains. It settles. It waits. It will outlive all who remember your name. Pripyat Central Square, 10:45 a.m. The sun climbs higher in the sky as you approach Pripyat proper. Despite the military checkpoints, despite the warnings, you've managed to work your way closer to the heart of the incident. Curiosity drives you forward. There's a strange quality to the emptiness here. A modern city devoid of its inhabitants creates a unique kind of silence. The wide boulevards designed for crowds now stand vacant. The towering apartment blocks stare down with hundreds of empty windows. The world looks unchanged, but feels fundamentally altered. What you don't yet comprehend is that your body has begun its own invisible transformation. The radiation you've absorbed in just these few hours exceeds what most nuclear workers are permitted for an entire career. Inside you, at the submicroscopic level, a cascading series of biological events has been set in motion, events that will continue long after you leave this place, if you leave at all. The metallic taste in your mouth has intensified. You've been trying to ignore it, attributing it to thirst or anxiety, but it's becoming impossible to dismiss. It coats your tongue, the inside of your cheeks, the back of your throat. This is not psychological. It's a direct physical response to the ionization occurring in your mouth, tissues as radioactive particles decay. You swallow repeatedly, but the taste persists. Your skin feels peculiar, not painful exactly, not yet, but sensitized, as if a mild electrical current were passing over the surface. This is radiation interacting with the nerve endings just below your skin. The sensation will worsen in the coming hours as the damage accumulates. For now, it's just a strange tingling that makes you occasionally brush at your arms, as if to remove an insect that isn't there. The buildings around you show no external damage. The disaster at the reactor, just a few kilometers away, hasn't toppled structures or shattered windows. The danger here isn't from physical destruction, but from contamination that has settled everywhere, on rooftops, on playground equipment, on the leaves of trees lining the streets, on the very pavement beneath your feet. Each step you take disturbs some of these particles, sending them back into the air around you, where you inhale them with your next breath. A playground comes into view, swings moving slightly in the breeze. A colorful carousel, a Ferris wheel that was scheduled to open for the May Day celebrations, just days from now. It never will. This image, the abandoned amusement park in the workers' paradise, will become iconic in later years, a symbol of technological hubris and instantaneous abandonment. Today, it's simply eerie. The absence of children's voices creates a vacuum that makes your ears ring. Or perhaps that ringing isn't from the silence. Perhaps it's another symptom beginning to manifest, tinnitus from radiation affecting the delicate structures of your inner ear. You shake your head as if to clear it, but the high-pitched sound persists at the edges of your hearing. Your nausea returns, stronger now. You haven't eaten since early morning, yet your stomach churns as if in revolt against a heavy meal. You find a bench and sit, bending forward slightly to ease the discomfort. The bench is coated with the same invisible contaminants as everything else in this city. The longer you sit, the more you absorb through your clothing, through your skin. The sun overhead seems unusually bright, almost painful to look at, even indirectly. Your eyes water, your vision blurs slightly, then clears again. The radiation is affecting your corneas, the transparent covering of your eyes. They'll continue to deteriorate over the coming hours and days, potentially leading to cataracts much earlier than would naturally occur. Despite the growing discomfort, you stand and continue walking. The center of Pripyat reveals more signs of sudden departure. A newspaper blown against a wall with yesterday's date, April 26th, describing Soviet achievements. A shopping bag dropped on a corner, groceries still inside. A bicycle leaning against a tree, unchained, as if its owner stepped away for just a moment, and will return shortly. No one will return shortly. The levels of radioactive contamination in central Pripyat are already hundreds of times above safety limits. In some hotspots, where particular concentrations of fallout have accumulated, they're thousands of times above what a human can endure without harm. You walk through these variations in invisible danger, unaware of the hotspots, except for the clicking of the Geiger counter you don't have. Your headache intensifies suddenly, pressure building behind your eyes. You stop, pressing your palms against your temples. The pain recedes slightly, then returns in a wave that makes you gasp. This is the beginning of central nervous system involvement, radiation damaging the blood vessels in your brain, causing inflammation and pressure. In the coming days, this could progress to seizures, loss of consciousness, eventual coma. But for now, it's just a headache, unlike any you've experienced before. A deep structural pain, rather than the surface tension of an ordinary stress headache. You should turn back. Every instinct tells you this, even without understanding the specific danger. Your body is sending emergency signals through every available channel: pain, nausea, sensory distortions. But the human desire to bear witness is powerful. You've come this far, just a little closer to the reactor, you think, just to see what happened. As you continue toward the edge of the city that faces the nuclear plant, your skin's sensitivity transforms into something more definite, a burning sensation, as if you've spent far too long in strong sunlight. Radiation erythema, the medical texts will call it, the reddening of skin exposed to radiation. It's beginning on your face, your neck, the backs of your hands, the areas most exposed as you've walked. The damage occurring at the cellular level has begun to manifest visibly. Your nausea peaks suddenly. You barely manage to turn aside before vomiting onto the empty street. There's little in your stomach to bring up, mostly bile, burning your already irritated throat. You spit repeatedly, trying to clear the taste from your mouth, but the metallic flavor remains, intensified if anything, by the act of being sick. This is a critical warning sign of acute radiation syndrome. Vomiting within hours of exposure indicates a potentially lethal dose. Your body is desperately trying to expel the poison, not understanding that it's already been incorporated into your cells that it's damaging you from within, rather than sitting in your stomach like ingested toxin. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, straighten up. The world swims around you momentarily before steadying. You should stop now, find help, but stubbornness drives you forward, just a little further, just to see. The edge of Pripyat offers a vista across open ground toward the power plant complex. From here you can see the damaged reactor building, reactor number 4. The roof has been blown off by the explosion. What you can't see is that the core itself is exposed, still burning, still releasing massive amounts of radiation into the atmosphere. The graphite moderator blocks are on fire, sending a plume of highly radioactive smoke into the sky. This plume is invisible from your distance, but it's spreading radioactive particles across a vast area, particles that will eventually contaminate not just the Soviet Union, but parts of Eastern and Western Europe as well. This viewpoint is where the radiation levels are highest in the city, directly facing the damaged reactor with minimal shielding. Standing here for just minutes doubles the dose you've already received. The invisible particles crash through your body like miniature bullets, damaging cells, breaking DNA strands, creating free radicals that cause secondary damage as they interact with cellular components. Eventually, even your determination falters. The combination of physical symptoms becomes impossible to ignore. Your vision blurs again, this time accompanied by floating dark spots that don't clear. Your legs feel suddenly weak, unsteady beneath you. Your skin burns as if scraped raw. The nausea returns in waves that leave you gasping. You turn away from the reactor view and begin the journey back through the empty city, moving more slowly now. Your earlier energy has abandoned you, replaced by a fatigue so profound it makes each step an effort of will. This is not simple tiredness. This is your body's resources being overwhelmed by the massive cellular damage occurring throughout your systems. As you walk, you notice another symptom. Your gums are bleeding slightly. When you run your tongue over your teeth, you taste blood mixing with the metallic flavor already present. The rapidly dividing cells in your gums, like those in your bone marrow and intestinal lining, are particularly vulnerable to radiation damage. They're dying faster than they can be replaced, leading to tissue breakdown. Time becomes distorted as you make your way through Pripyat. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. You find yourself standing in places with no clear recollection of having walked there. Your consciousness is becoming fragmented as the radiation affects your brain function, disrupts your neurotransmitters, damages the blood vessels supplying oxygen to your brain tissue. The city seems to have grown larger, the distances between landmarks extending impossibly. Your pace slows further as your strength ebbs. The sun is past its zenith now, beginning its afternoon decline, but the heat you feel comes from within, your body's inflammatory response to massive cellular injury, a fever building as your immune system activates in confused defense against an enemy it can't identify or fight. By the time you reach the city's edge, the checkpoint where you slipped through hours ago, your condition has deteriorated significantly. You can barely remain upright. Your vision comes and goes in waves of clarity and blurriness. The burning sensation on your skin has intensified to the point where even the touch of your clothing is painful. Blood from your gums has mixed with your saliva, staining your lips red when you spit. A military patrol spots you stumbling along the road. They approach cautiously, their Geiger counters crackling as they near you. Even from a distance, the instruments detect the radiation your body has absorbed and is now itself emitting. You have become a walking source of contamination. Stop. "Don't come closer," one shouts, holding up a hand. He speaks into a radio, calling for medical support. They maintain their distance, watching as you sink to your knees, no longer able to stand. The world tilts and spins around you. The last thing you see before consciousness fades is the soldier's face, a mixture of pity and fear behind his protective mask. You wake in a medical facility. The ceiling above you is institutional white, cracked in places. The light hurts your eyes. You try to raise a hand to shield them, but find you lack the strength. Your arms feel leaden, disconnected from your will. A doctor leans into your field of vision, his features blurred by the protective gear he wears. "You're in hospital number 6 in Kyiv," he tells you. "You've received a severe dose of radiation. We're doing everything we can, everything they can." In 1986, for acute radiation syndrome, is largely supportive, fluids to combat dehydration, from vomiting and diarrhea, blood transfusions to replace failing bone marrow production, antibiotics to fight the infections that inevitably arise as your immune system collapses. The damage itself, the broken DNA, the dying cells, there's no treatment for this. They can only try to keep you alive long enough for your body to potentially repair itself if the damage isn't too severe. Days blur together in a haze of pain and medication. Your skin blisters and peels, revealing raw tissue beneath that oozes and refuses to heal. Your hair falls out in clumps on your pillow. Blood seeps from your nose, your gums, into your urine and stool. Your throat and esophagus, lined with rapidly dividing cells as vulnerable as those in your bone marrow, develop painful ulcers that make swallowing even saliva an exercise in agony. The doctors speak in hushed tones outside your room, their conversations a mix of clinical assessment and barely concealed horror at what radiation does to a human body. They've seen similar cases among the firefighters and plant workers who responded immediately after the explosion, men who stood on the roof of the adjacent reactor building, directly exposed to the open core, receiving in minutes doses that would be lethal many times over. You drift between consciousness and merciful oblivion. In your lucid moments, you piece together what happened from fragments of overheard conversations, from news reports on the small television in the corner of your room, the reactor's core meltdown during a safety test, the explosion that blew the roof off the containment building, the graphite fire that burned for days, sending radioactive material high into the atmosphere, the evacuation of Pripyat, of the surrounding villages, the establishment of what they're now calling the exclusion zone, 30 kilometers around the damaged reactor where no one will live for decades, perhaps centuries. And you walked into this, breathed it, absorbed it through your skin, into your blood, your organs, your bones, the invisible fire that doesn't burn until it's already too late to escape it. 2 weeks after your exposure, the damage to your bone marrow has progressed to the point where your blood counts reach critical levels. You bruise from the slightest pressure, blue-black marks appearing on your arms where the blood pressure cuff tightens, around the IV sites where needles enter your veins. Your white cell count approaches 0, leaving you defenseless against infections. The antibiotics dripping into your veins are preventive now, fighting against invisible invaders before they can take hold in your compromised system. The radiation oncologist who has taken charge of your case sits beside your bed. You can see his face today. They've determined that you're no longer actively shedding significant radiation, that it's safe for medical personnel to work without full protective gear. His expression is grave as he explains your condition, the prognosis, the limited options available. The damage to your bone marrow is severe, he says. Your blood counts continue to decline despite our interventions. We're giving you transfusions, but it's becoming more difficult to maintain adequate levels. You try to speak, but your voice is barely audible. Your throat raw from vomiting, from the radiation burns that extend internally. He leans closer to hear you. We're going to die, you manage to whisper. He hesitates, then nods slowly. The dose you received, walking through Pripyat at that time, so close to the reactor, it was well above the LD-50. Seeing your confusion, he explains, the lethal dose for 50% of exposed individuals, your specific dose was likely higher still. You close your eyes, absorbing this information. The enormity of it is difficult to grasp in your weakened state, all from walking through air that seemed ordinary, from breathing dust you couldn't see, from the heat you didn't feel until it was already burning you from within. You ask, opening your eyes again. Days, he answers honestly. A week at most, given the progression we're seeing. I'm sorry we can't do more. Medical science just doesn't have effective treatments for radiation damage this extensive. You nod slightly, the small movement requiring enormous effort. The doctor squeezes your hand gently, the skin so fragile now that even this careful pressure leaves a mark, and stands to go. He has other patients, other victims of the disaster, some with better prognoses, many with equally grim futures. In the hours and days that follow, as your systems continue their inexorable decline, you think about the journey that brought you here, the curiosity that drove you toward danger, rather than away from it, the invisible threat that gave no warning until it was far too late, the ordinary seeming world that concealed extraordinary hazard. You think about the exclusion zone that will outlive you by decades, perhaps centuries, the abandoned city where children's toys still lie in playgrounds no child will use again in your lifetime. The reactor, now being encased in concrete and steel to contain its deadly contents, a sarcophagus for technological hubris. And you think about the heat you didn't feel as radiation passed through your body, the heat that built silently within as your cells died and your systems failed, the heat of inflammation that now consumes you from within, as your body fights its losing battle against damage too profound to repair. The end, when it comes, is both relief and tragedy. Relief from suffering that medications can only partly address. Tragedy in the unnecessary loss, the preventable exposure, the invisible danger that claimed you because you couldn't see it, couldn't feel it, couldn't comprehend it, until it had already done its work. In the years that follow, your case becomes a data point in medical literature about acute radiation syndrome, one of many victims of Chernobyl whose experiences help shape understanding of radiation's effects on the human body. Your journey through the exclusion zone becomes a cautionary tale about invisible threats, about the dangers that don't announce themselves with convenient warnings, about the heat you don't feel until it's already burning you beyond recovery. The zone remains. The reactor, entombed in its sarcophagus, continues its radioactive decay, a process that will take not years or decades, but millennia to complete. The land around it slowly recovers in strange ways, wildlife returning to areas where humans no longer live, vegetation reclaiming abandoned structures, nature adapting to the invisible presence that drove humans away. But you are gone, consumed by the heat you never felt, by the danger you walked into without understanding, by the invisible fire that burns without flame. Checkpoint exit, 4:15 p.m. The military truck slows as it approaches the checkpoint, marking the edge of what officials have hastily designated as the exclusion zone. You sit in the back, one among a dozen evacuees being transported to safety. Your clothes are the same ones you wore on your journey, and now invisibly contaminated with radioactive particles that cling to the fibers that transfer to your skin with every movement. No one has told you to change them. No one has measured their radioactivity. The hasty evacuation has left little time for such precautions for ordinary citizens. The soldiers manning the checkpoint wave the truck through after a cursory check of papers. Their faces are partially hidden behind masks, their eyes revealing a mixture of boredom and unease. They've been told enough to know they should be concerned, but not enough to fully comprehend the invisible danger they stand guard against. Like you, they breathe the air at the edge of catastrophe, trusting authorities who themselves are struggling to understand the scope of what has happened. The truck continues beyond the checkpoint, carrying you away from the exclusion zone, but not from the consequences of having been there. The physical boundary, the hastily erected signs, the military vehicles, the makeshift barricades, creates an illusion of separation between danger and safety. But radiation recognizes no such borders. What you've absorbed remains with you, a silent passenger in your bloodstream, your organs, your bones. Your fellow evacuees speak in hushed tones or sit in stunned silence. An elderly woman clutches a small bag containing what few possessions she managed to grab before being told to leave her home of 50 years. A young mother holds a sleeping child, her face a mask of worry, as she occasionally glances down at her son, searching for any sign of the invisible harm she fears he may have received. A power plant worker, still wearing his work clothes, stares blankly ahead, perhaps replaying the events that led to the disaster, perhaps contemplating the colleagues he left behind. You feel different now than when you began your curious journey into the zone. The initial symptoms, the metallic taste, the nausea, the skin sensitivity, have temporarily receded, creating a false sense that the danger has passed with your departure from the contaminated area. This is the treacherous nature of radiation exposure, the silence between cause and most devastating effects. The latent period, medical professionals will call it, when the body appears to recover before the deeper damage reveals itself. The truck follows a route that takes you further from Pripyat, from the reactor, from the heart of the disaster. Through the open back, you watch the landscape change, from the abandoned zone to villages where life continues, where people tend gardens and hang laundry as if nothing has happened. They don't know yet. The Soviet authorities have been slow to acknowledge the scale of the disaster, reluctant to cause panic, to admit failure in their nuclear program. These people going about their normal lives are still being exposed to elevated radiation levels carried on the wind, settling in their soil, contaminating their crops and water. You arrive at a reception center set up in a school gymnasium in a town 50 kilometers from the power plant. Medical personnel direct evacuees through a screening process. Questions about where you were when the accident occurred, how close you came to the reactor, what symptoms you may have experienced. Your answers raise concerns. Your description of walking through Pripyat, approaching the reactor, overlook the nausea and metallic taste, the skin sensitivity that has temporarily subsided. These indicate significant exposure. A doctor examines you briefly, taking your pulse, listening to your lungs, examining your skin for the radiation erythema that will soon reappear. He makes notes in a file, but tells you little. Information is controlled, rationed, as much a part of Soviet medical practice as bandages and medications. He directs you to a decontamination station where your clothing is finally taken, sealed in plastic bags for disposal. You shower underwater that's uncomfortably hot, scrubbing your skin with harsh soap that leaves it red and irritated. This external decontamination does nothing for the radioactive particles already absorbed into your body, but it prevents further exposure from contaminated clothing and skin. You're given clean clothes, simple utilitarian items that don't quite fit, and directed to an area where evacuees are being assigned temporary housing. Your name is taken, added to a growing list of the displaced. You're told you'll be contacted about more permanent arrangements, about compensation for your losses. These promises feel hollow, bureaucratic responses to a disaster whose scale dwarfs the systems designed to address it. That night, in a cot, in a repurposed school classroom, shared with dozens of other evacuees, sleep eludes you. Your body, which seemed to recover briefly after leaving the zone, begins to reassert its distress. The nausea returns, stronger than before. Your skin burns despite the cool night air. When you visit the communal bathroom, your urine shows traces of blood, microscopic at first, not enough to notice in the poor lighting, but a sign of the damage occurring in your kidneys, your bladder, throughout your urinary tract. By morning, your condition has deteriorated further. The radiation erythema has reappeared on your exposed skin, face, neck, hands, with greater intensity. The red flush looks like severe sunburn, but penetrates deeper, affecting blood vessels and underlying tissues. Your gums bleed when you brush your teeth. The food holds no appeal. The thought of eating intensifies your nausea. Other evacuees look at you with concern, then avoid your gaze. Your visible symptoms are a reminder of what they fear for themselves, for their children. A medical team visiting the evacuation center identifies you as requiring hospitalization. You're loaded into an ambulance for transport to a facility in Kiev, better equipped to handle radiation casualties. The ride is a blur of discomfort, each bump in the road sending waves of pain through your increasingly sensitive body. The medics speak quietly among themselves, using technical terms you don't understand, occasionally glancing at you with professional concern masking deeper unease. Hospital number 6, in Kiev, has been designated for cases like yours, significant radiation exposure requiring specialized treatment. You're admitted through a separate entrance, your contamination status noted prominently on your chart. Blood samples are taken immediately, multiple vials of dark red fluid that will reveal the extent of the damage to your bone marrow, your lymphocytes, your overall blood composition. The ward they place you in contains others with similar exposure levels, plant workers mostly, a few firefighters who responded to the initial explosion without adequate protection, a couple of curious individuals like yourself who ventured too close to the invisible danger. The room has a peculiar atmosphere, clinical efficiency overlaid with an almost tangible sense of doom. The medical staff move with purpose, but speak in hushed tones, as if volume might somehow exacerbate your conditions. The days that follow establish a rhythm of treatment, assessment, deterioration. Your blood counts reveal the classic pattern of acute radiation syndrome. Lymphocytes dropping first, followed by platelets, then red blood cells and neutrophils. Your bone marrow, exposed to significant radiation, is failing to produce new cells to replace those that naturally die. This leads to multiple cascading problems: immune suppression, inability to clot properly, reduced oxygen transport throughout your body. The treatments are supportive rather than curative. Transfusions to replace failing blood components, antibiotics to prevent infections as your immune system collapses, anti-nausea medications that only partially address the relentless vomiting that begins as your intestinal lining breaks down. These interventions buy time, but cannot reverse the fundamental cellular damage caused by your exposure. Your skin blisters and peels, revealing raw tissue beneath that weeps clear fluid and refuses to heal normally. Your hair falls out in patches, first from your head, then your eyebrows, eventually all body hair. Internal mucous membranes, mouth, throat, the entire digestive tract develop painful ulcerations that make eating impossible. You're placed on intravenous nutrition that your compromised system struggles to process. Through it all, there's a particular quality to your suffering that distinguishes radiation sickness from other ailments: the silence of it. No pathogen to identify and target, no tumor to remove, just the quiet, inexorable breakdown of the body's most basic functions at the cellular level. The radiation that entered you in those hours of walking through the zone left no visible traces, no path of destruction that can be mapped and addressed. It simply changed the fundamental properties of your cells, altered DNA, created cascades of free radicals that continue to cause damage long after the initial exposure ended. Other patients come and go from the ward, some improving enough for discharge, many deteriorating further and being moved to intensive care. You occupy a middle ground for weeks, too damaged for meaningful recovery, too resilient for immediate system collapse. This prolonged decline allows you to witness your own dissolution with a clarity that more rapid cases are spared. In lucid moments between medication-induced hazes, you reflect on the journey that brought you here, the curiosity that drove you toward the reactor when wisdom should have sent you in the opposite direction, the invisible nature of the threat, how normal everything looked, how ordinary the air felt in your lungs, how the danger gave no sensory warnings until it was far too late. You think about the silence of radiation, how it entered you without sound, how it damages without pain until the secondary effects manifest, how it kills with a quietness that feels almost contemplative. Visitors are restricted due to your compromised immune status and lingering contamination concerns, but occasionally you're able to speak with relatives by telephone. These conversations become increasingly difficult, partly due to your weakening condition, partly due to the impossible task of conveying what radiation sickness really means to those who haven't witnessed it. How do you explain that you're being destroyed from within by something you never saw or felt? How do you convey the particular horror of a body turning against itself at the most fundamental level? The silence extends to these interactions, the gaps between what you experience and what you can express. Medical staff take samples daily, blood, urine, occasionally bone marrow drawn painfully from your hip, with long needles that pierce already sensitive tissue. These samples tell the story of your continuing decline in charts and numbers that track the failure of your bone marrow, the breakdown of your organ functions, the accumulating damage that your body cannot repair quickly enough to survive. A month after your exposure, your condition reaches a critical threshold. Your blood counts, despite transfusions, can no longer be maintained at levels compatible with life. Your kidneys, damaged by both direct radiation effects and the toxins released by dying cells throughout your body, begin to fail. Your lungs, their delicate tissues increasingly compromised, struggle to maintain adequate oxygen exchange. The medical team adjusts their approach from curative intent to palliation, managing your pain, your nausea, your increasingly labored breathing. The shift is subtle but unmistakable in the changed tone of their discussions, in the types of medications they administer, in the gentler way they handle your fragile body during necessary procedures. In these final days, the silence that has characterized your condition from the beginning deepens. Your voice, damaged by radiation effects on your throat and weakened by your overall decline, fades to a whisper and then to nothing. Your breathing becomes the loudest sound you make, increasingly labored, occasionally rattling with accumulated fluids. Your weakened body can no longer clear. The silence you first encountered at the edge of the exclusion zone, that eerie absence of normal sounds, that pressure against your eardrums that made you swallow to equalize, has followed you here, has entered you, has become the defining quality of your journey toward death. The radiation that caused this did its work without sound, without spectacle, without any of the dramatic indicators that humans have evolved to recognize as danger. In your final conscious moments, as your systems shut down one by one, you understand something essential about the disaster at Chernobyl, something beyond the technical failures, the human errors, the political mismanagement. You understand that its true horror lies in its silence, the invisible, odorless, tasteless nature of the threat, the delayed connection between cause and effect, the way it kills without any of the markers that allow humans to comprehend and narrate their own endings. The silence carries you into darkness, your heart no longer receiving adequate signals from your radiation-damaged nervous system, no longer supported by sufficient oxygen from your failing lungs, slows and stops without drama, without pronouncement. In the final moments, there is only the silence, the same silence that greeted you at the edge of the zone, the silence you carried home in your blood and bones, the silence that will persist in the exclusion zone for centuries after your brief journey through it has been forgotten. The legacy of your curiosity, your momentary defiance of warnings, extends beyond your individual death. You become one of the statistics cited in reports about the disaster, one of the approximately 4,000 eventual deaths attributed directly to Chernobyl radiation exposure by conservative estimates, one of up to 60,000 in more comprehensive analyses. Your case contributes to the medical literature on acute radiation syndrome, helps shape protocols for future nuclear emergencies, becomes part of the collective understanding of what radiation does to the human body. The exclusion zone itself continues its silent existence, 30 kilometers of abandoned land surrounding the damaged reactor. Nature reclaims the space humans evacuated. Wildlife returns, adapting in ways scientists study with fascination and concern. The reactor, encased in its concrete sarcophagus, and later in a more permanent containment structure, continues its radioactive decay, a process that will require not decades, but millennia to complete. Pripyat stands empty, a modern ruin preserved by its contamination. The playground where you paused during your fatal journey, the swings, the carousel, the Ferris wheel that never officially opened, becomes iconic in photographs documenting the disaster. Visitors wearing protective gear and carrying dosimeters eventually come to witness what remains, to try to comprehend the scale of what happened here, to feel the silence that you experienced in your final journey. But none of them can truly understand what you learned, that the most profound dangers are often the ones we cannot sense, that radiation kills with a silence that defies human comprehension, that the invisible threats of the modern world require vigilance beyond our evolutionary preparation. They cannot know what you knew in those final days, the particular quality of suffering that comes from carrying silence home in your body, from being destroyed from within by forces that never announce themselves, that never make a sound. The silence remains, in the abandoned city, in the continuing decay of radioactive elements, in the gap between what happened at Chernobyl and what can ever truly be expressed about it. The silence that claimed you persists, long after your story ends, speaking volumes in its refusal to speak at all.